research. Okay, so now I get to click got it. Oops. All right, so let's start with an exercise. So think of a terrible experience you've had with a website. I'm not going to give you a lot of time, just a couple of minutes. What made it so horrible? I can't give you a lot of time because we don't have a lot of time in this session. What made it so horrible? What about it?
Well, for me, I'll go. This is Loretta.
No, we're going to talk about it in a minute, but right now,
Oh, you're gonna. That was rhetorical. Okay, I thought you were waiting for
right,
us to
right now,
comment.
I want you to reflect, and then I'll ask you to speak. Okay, so now share your thoughts. Go ahead, Loretta.
For me, it was. It's often the color. You know, sometimes it's very light blue or charcoal. You know, black on a charcoal gray background or something like that, where there's not enough contrast.
Okay.
For me, it's too many ads and impossibility to find the help contact number.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
And when I say ads, some of them are for the entity itself, you know,
Yeah.
upgrade, upgrade, upgrade.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I have a very low frustration tolerance when I can't figure things out. And Jane will tell you, I'm almost getting to the point where I'm like internet phobic. I don't even want to do it. I rather just call and deal with the person. My last experience, which was a failure, was trying to sign a waiver from Ride the Wind down in Ocracoke, which Jane forwarded to me. And I got to the end and I couldn't submit it. It kept asking me to add people, and I just gave up. So I'll sign a waiver when I get down there.
And
Okay.
what I find sometimes happened yesterday, I was looking up something I wanted to buy. I was trying to go to their website, which I did, but they didn't. Anyway, I was redirected to Amazon, only I put in specifically what I wanted. And Amazon, of course, gave me all kinds of things and never what I wanted. So
yeah, it will do that.
That's annoying.
My most recent one was that I was trying to inquire about an appointment with a medical group I had not previously dealt with, and the only telephone number available for them on any website, and I looked at a number, had only a message that said to call back in business hours, even though it was business hours.
Oh, no.
No way to contact a human being. And then I tried then they alleged that I could make an appointment online, and that ran me around in circles. And I finally just gave up and found a different doctor.
Oh, my.
I see that Mary Lou Tucker has her hand raised, electronic hand. If you want to unmute yourself, Mary Lou, and tell your saga.
I did. I forgot to lower my hand.
Yeah, I recognize your voice. Okay, so here are some ideas about what can make things bad. They're being ugly, and you've mentioned that. Hard to read, text too small, text too light against the background. Loretta, you mentioned that. Is it hard to understand? Does it use jargon? Is the language unclear? Are sentences too long? Is the process complicated? The process for getting done what you want to get done? Is it unhelpful in the sense of it doesn't explain what to do? It doesn't tell you what you've done wrong and how to correct, or what you've done something other than what it expects. I don't like the idea that users do wrong things. Was it inaccessible? Does it require vision, but you're blind? Does it require hearing, but you're deaf? And anything else? You've all brought up several things. Thank you. Okay, so all of these problems are design defects. They are not your fault. They're caused by inadequate attention to user needs and user experience. So, what is a user experience? This is the definition from a white paper produced by a group that I was involved with about a dozen years ago, before I moved to the UK, but it was connected to that. And it ended up being in the international standard. So it's a person's perceptions and responses that result from the use or anticipated use, even if you don't, you're anticipating using a product. Part of your user experience of that product is what you anticipate the product is going to be like, or the system or the service. And this comes from one of the ISO standards. By the way, ISO does not stand for the International Standards Organization. It's the International Organization for Standardization, and it's called ISO as a kind of a pun on standardization. So, okay, so now we call user experience, we in the industry and in the academic field, we who focus on it, we call it UX for short. So now why does UX matter in digital systems and products? Well, for people to use a product, they have to see value in it. I mean, you're not going to use something if you don't think it's going to be worthwhile. If you have a negative experience, it's really lasting and hard to shake off. Like Jane, you went to a different doctor. People disregard products that they find too hard to use. They just don't use them. And organizations never know their users as well as they think they do. There are three perspectives on UX as a phrase. The first is that it's a phenomenon. It's the experience, what a person experiences while using a product or before and after, and the context and impact of a user experience of that product or system. UX is a field. It's a field of study. It studies what users experience and how experiences form. It develops methods to facilitate experiences that we want people to have. And this is what I did my PhD in. And then there's UX as a practice, which is applying UX methods to understand people and create products that they find useful and have good experiences using. And this is what I've been doing at work for 40 years. So don't let anybody tell you, when I say developing methods to facilitate desired experiences, it's not possible to create an experience. You will hear designers talk about how they're designing experiences or they're creating experiences. They're creating things that people experience. They're not creating the experiences themselves, because an experience happens within a person, and it is as much a product of what the person brings to it as it is what the technology brings to it. So they're creating things that are experienced. So now these three perspectives of phenomenon, field, and practice, they work together. The field studies the phenomenon and the practice in some cases, and the practice applies techniques to support the phenomenon. Some years ago, Peter Morville, whom I've met, I can't say I really know him, he developed this UX honeycomb, where he puts value at the center and these 6 characteristics around it. And it says that valuable products are usable, useful, desirable, accessible, credible, and findable. Now, I think, I've revised it, I think that value is the same as desirability. And so I've changed desirable to appealing. I'm sure that's what he meant. And this covers the aesthetics. So the revised UX honeycomb is usable, useful, appealing, accessible, credible, and findable. And I've not published this anywhere. I haven't even told anybody about it except you. You're the first time. It's just I got to thinking about it and decided to change that for this talk. At some point, I'll talk to Peter about it. Anyway, so I'm going to cover 2 of these qualities here, and that's usable and accessible, because they're what I do in my work, and I think they're also the most important of these, although other people might argue differently. Now, what is usability? The formal definition is, again, in an ISO standard, the extent to which a product can be used by specified users. It's not usable in the abstract, it's usable by the people for whom you're designing it, to achieve specified goals, And these could be user goals or organizational goals or a combination of the two. With effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. So you're specifying who's going to be using it, where they're going to be using it, and in what context, what they're going to be using it to do. And then given those parameters, the usability is the effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction that result from their use. And again, this is a different ISO standard, but so the three key components are effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. What are these? Effectiveness is how fully the product supports your goals. ISO defines it as accuracy and completeness. Completeness is, can you do everything you wanted? And accuracy is what's the quality of what you got done? Did it come out the way you wanted? Efficiency is the resources that you spend to achieve effectiveness, time and effort mostly. But it also includes asking for help and correcting errors and cursing and tearing your hair out and all that stuff. So, which all can be captured as time and effort, but it's really more complex than that. Now, efficiency depends on effectiveness. We have a stereotype of an efficient secretary or an assistant, but if they're not getting the right thing done, it doesn't matter how quickly they do it. Efficiency, you can't have efficiency unless you also have effectiveness first. So that's what we mean by efficiency in this context. And satisfaction is how you feel about using the product. It's in the positive sense, it's comfort, confidence, acceptance, pleasure, achievement, etc. And in the negative sense, it's frustration, anger, confusion, swearing, going to a different doctor. Okay, now I'm going to talk a minute about accessibility. Accessibility is the ability of a product to be used by people with disabilities. And in particular, web accessibility means that websites, web tools, and web technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. And this comes from the World Wide Web Consortium. The Brits say consortium. That's one thing that I have kind of adopted. The web accessibility encompasses all disabilities that affect access to the web, including 6 key ones, the 6 most common ones, but there are others: auditory, cognitive, neurological, physical, speech, and visual. It also benefits people without disabilities, such as people who are using mobile phones, smartwatches, smart TVs, and so on, and other devices with small screens. And if you have a mobile phone in your hand, you have really only, either you're holding it and you're texting with your thumbs, or you're holding it in one hand and you've only got the other hand to interact with it. Then there's older people with changing abilities due to aging, and I'll get into that in a minute. People with temporary disabilities. You may have a broken arm, you may have lost your glasses. And you do have a disability in that context, but it's situational or temporary. Situational limitations, you may be in bright sunlight, or you may be someplace where you cannot listen to audio. Or you have a slow internet connection. That is, accessibility should accommodate that as well. Why is it important? Well, 1 billion people worldwide, that's 1 in 7 of the world's population, have some kind of disability. It's quite a lot. You wouldn't dream of building an office building without wheelchair access. So why would you build a website without providing equal access for people with other kinds of disabilities? People just don't think about this a lot of times. So the question is, what should website providers do to provide accessibility? Well, they should follow the guidelines in the international standard, and I'm about to give you the URL for that. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines provide a long list of requirements, and here's the link for that set of guidelines. ADA and the laws of many other countries require public organizations, including but not limited to government agencies, to make their websites accessible. And this includes commercial organizations. It's like hotels, for example, have been sued because their websites were not accessible. And the complainant won. And many, if not most, well, probably not most, the big ones, they tend to do a half decent job. But an awful lot still use click here as link text. Now, a lot of people don't really understand why that's a problem. This is more for people who use screen readers. A screen reader is an assistive technology that reads the content of the screen out loud, and it's used by blind people and other people who may not have, who may be in bright light where they can't see the screen, for example. And it is a way of interacting with the website or the email or whatever in such a way that you listen to it rather than reading it visually. And you can still use a keyboard. The software will take input from the keyboard. But the problem with click here is that screen readers have a capability to jump from link to link or to read out a list of links. And because a lot of blind users, people who use screen readers all the time, they want to know what the links are on the page. And so a lot of times, one of the first things they'll do is say, okay, show me the list of links. And if the links are all click here, they're not going to know what that's about. It'll just say, click here, click here, click here. And so link text needs to be meaningful. This is one of the most overlooked or one of the most frequently violated web content guidelines on the web. And there's always more that can be done. Even if many, if not most of them, do at least a half decent job, they can always do more. Accessibility affects older people too, as we heard a little bit. This is a special interest of mine. I have a talk that I give specifically about design for older adults. And I started giving it in 2016, I think it was. And I use myself as an example, and things change. In that talk, I use the mosquito ringtone website, which is more than just that mosquito thing. It includes ringtones, or it includes sounds from that go higher and higher in pitch. And it starts with one that everybody should be able to hear, and then it goes to one that it says people under 60 can hear, and then people under 50 and so on. Well, I can still hear the one that's under 60, but I can no longer hear the one that's under 50. And I could the first time I presented it. So it's been interesting to see how even my experiences have changed. So it's kind of obvious reasons that this is a special interest in accessibility. I can talk to people about it and give examples from my own experience as an older person. And as we know, aging brings changes, senses, your vision, hearing, and touch, which are the most important for using technology. But, people are starting to build olfactory interfaces. And I mean, it's not entirely olfactory, but they incorporate that. And they're talking about the inspiration that we can get from chefs. Movement changes. You become less comfortable. You're less coordinated. You're not as fast. You're not as steady. Cognition changes. You forget things. You don't learn as fast. You don't process information as fast as you used to. You don't react as fast as you used to. And your attitude changes. You don't have as much confidence with new tech, or you're less willing to learn new products and how to do things because it takes more work than it used to. So all of that contributes to the problems that a lot of older people have with using tech, and especially new tech. I mean, new to them, which may also be new. Now, the next couple of slides show statistics from the UK because that's where I got them. But I'm sure they're pretty much relevant for the US as well. We are similar countries. So from 2013 to 2020, recent internet use by older adults in the UK grew a lot. Now, I don't know why they define recent as the last 3 months. I think recent, for me, recent is like the last week, but that's how they do it. So among the 55 to 64 age group, it was up by 34% in those 7 years. Among the 65 to 74 age group, it was up by 55%. And among the 75 plus age group, it was up by 114%. That's huge. And this was before COVID. However, older adults in the UK still use the internet quite a bit less than younger people do. They, and my next slide talks about this a bit. Their needs continue to be unmet disproportionately. In 2019, the combination of 55 and 65 plus age groups were only 17% of internet users worldwide. And the 25 to 34%, 25 to 34-year-olds were almost twice that percentage at 32% globally. So this shows that that the older adults are still not using the internet as much as the younger people are, and it's therefore not meeting their needs as well. So why is this a problem? I don't mean why is it a problem for older adults. I mean, why do we have this problem? Well, people tend to design for people like themselves, and most designers are youngish. So they, when I say can, I don't mean they're allowed to. I mean, it's possible that they do. It's common for them to overlook the needs of older users. And older users do not demand accessibility or complain when it's inadequate, especially in Britain. They may whine, but they don't demand. And older users may not even know what should be provided. They often blame themselves for their technology struggles, saying they're behind the times or unable to learn new things. So, Loretta, you're going to like this. One issue affecting older adults is overlooked more often than any other issue, and that is color contrast. And this problem often explains why we older adults struggle to read something online. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines require a contrast of 4.5 for normal size text. And on this Montgomery County website, this white text on green has just over half that. I think it was 2.69 or 2.59, something like that. So it's not much over half that. This makes it harder for older people to use, and for other people with less than perfect vision, to read these texts and read these sites. And sometimes when you complain about it, people say, well, you could go to the high contrast version. Well, that's not an answer. It's supposed to be accessible to all. So now, why is so much technology just so hard to use? As I've mentioned some of these before, that organizations assume that they understand users and their needs. They don't do the user research to find out. They don't do the usability testing to find out if their products have met those needs. People tend to design for others like themselves. The knowledge of user-centered principles and processes is not as widely known as it should be, even after 40 years. And this is to those of us who have been involved in it for a long time, and to those of us who have been working in it and think it's kind of, many of my colleagues and I think it's kind of obvious, you should find out who the people are that you're designing for, and not just design something that you think they should like. It's just not obvious to everybody, and it's not as widely known as we think it should be. And that organizations tend to know more about accessibility than usability, thanks to laws and standards, but some issues still get overlooked or ignored. And again, users don't demand these features or complain when they're inadequate. So the question is, what can you do? Complain. When you see an issue that you recognize as an issue of usability or accessibility, speak up. When you see an issue of something that makes it hard for you to use a website or software or any technology, speak up if you can. Familiarize yourself, especially with the overlooked requirement that most affects older users. If you don't have it handy, then just Google WCAG color contrast. Or you could add this link to your favorites or bookmarks. That is the specific requirement for color contrast. And there's a WebAIM, I forget what the acronym AIM stands for, but it's a good resource about accessibility. And they have a contrast checker tool that tests contrast to see if it meets the WCAG requirement. And so if you're going to complain, this will give you data. It will give you a number. Your contrast is 3:1, and it really needs to be 4.5:1. And Jane, I'm afraid this won't help with your problem, but use Contact Us to let website owners know that they're losing business or even violating the ADA.
I got to say, I did my best with that. I found
Yeah.
out what medical system the office I was using, trying to contact was in, and I called them and complained.
Good for you.
Asked them to investigate why this office was inaccessible.
Good. I hope you hear. I hope you get
I don't expect to hear from them ever again, but it was satisfying at the time.
Yes, of course.
Are
Okay.
you gonna provide these websites to us?
Yes.
Okay.
So now it's
I
over to-
I wasn't able to write that one down, so.
No, of course not. I didn't expect you to. So I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see you.
Let's see. Where is the raise hand?
That's all right. There are only a few of us here. Go ahead, Dale.
Okay. Oh, I just lost Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, one thing you didn't mention, which I think is a problem, is moving objects, which are
Oh, yeah.
distracting.
Yeah.
I've forgotten the technical name for the app, but there's something that specializes in that. That drives me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's distracting, and
Yeah.
I think it's particularly distracting for older adults. So since you're
That's
working in that area, let me mention it to you. And of course, for
Yeah.
some people, it causes seizures.
Seizures tend to be caused by blinking more than movement at a certain frequency.
Okay.
And that is part of the accessibility requirement. Don't blink between these frequencies.
Okay.
Well, Elizabeth, this has been helpful for me because, I've just lost a lot of confidence and I started calling myself a techie retard and avoiding things. And Jane makes fun of me, but, it's frustrating and I'm just not used to not being able to quickly do things. And so I think this sort of validates that maybe it's a age interaction, not just IQ.
No, certainly not.
And
well, Dale.
And by the way, young people will sit down and just put in Google a question like, how do you do this? How do you do that? When I've tried to do that, it leads me often down the wrong path. For example, I have been trying to cancel a lot of recurrent charities.
Right.
And you go online and it says something like, oh, it's very simple. You just go to this website and hit cancel. Well, it's not true. There's nothing on the website that says cancel, So anyway,
A lot of times that's on purpose.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, another thing I think didn't get mentioned was the timeout. So sometimes you're doing something like
Yeah.
filling out a form and it gives you, however, 5 to 7 minutes and you get to the end and it times you out.
Yeah.
That can really be frustrating.
Yeah, it should allow you to request more time.
And sometimes they do. They're getting better now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, I've just pasted those links into the chat.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Questions?
Any other questions
Well, I have a comment.
or comments?
Ursula.
I have filled out forms, especially it seems the government asks if you found the information and they give you 25 questions, which to see if the website was usable. And first, it annoys me that they have so many questions, half of which don't seem relevant to me. But the thing that most annoys me is they don't always have a place where you can put comments.
Yeah.
And I know one time on one of the government ones, they did allow comments, and I wrote a long thing and even gave my email and said, contact me and I'd be glad to be a test user for
Uh-huh.
usability. Of course, they never contacted me.
Right. Well,
But yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, it's just they don't leave room for comments so that you can explain the total of what the problem is.
Yeah, yeah. I know that a lot of government agencies use the 4C survey people to do those things, and those are canned and they're not really valid. And so I never fill it out if it's 4C, FORESEE. You know, a lot of times you go to a government site and you get a pop-up saying 4C would like to ask you questions afterwards if you're willing. And I always say no, because I listened to a talk they gave one time. I mean, this was a dozen years ago, but I can't imagine that it's changed much. And they were making a big deal about an improvement of an increase of from 74 to 75% of one agency. And that is just not meaningful.
Mhm.
I have a
Not-
question if I couldn't find the hand. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Jane. Jane, go ahead.
This, when you just said that you were pasting something into the chat, how do you preserve something that somebody puts in chat?
You copy and paste it. Can you save this chat? Some Zoom meetings allow you to save the chat, but I don't see that here.
You can cut and paste it and just paste it
Yeah, it
into
says
your,
save chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you go down to the bottom of the chat window, you'll see the ellipsis, which some people call 3 dots. If you click that, at the top of that pop-up menu, it says save chat. And that will save it to a file on your computer.
And right now there's not much in there, so that should work. And you can also go to the base of the paste that she put in there and hold down your cursor. You put your cursor there and then hold down the left, whatever you call it. You're probably better at explaining this, Elizabeth. Or
Well,
Elizabeth.
it actually depends on your technology.
Okay, well, for me, it allows me to highlight it basically. And then if you right click in there, it will pop up some options, one of which is copy.
My
Jane's
mouse,
on an
my mouse
iPad.
has one button.
The other thing I do is I just clicked on each of your links and it opened up in my browser, and I can go in on my browser and say save the link. You know, I mean, go to
Yeah.
favorites.
Yeah, yeah. That's another way.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Elizabeth. This has been very
And-
instructive.
And
How
thanks to those of you.
would you, Elizabeth, go about building up your confidence if you're like me and you've gotten like so frustrated that you just want to pull your hair out and stop doing it?
Well, if you want to make a comment, you can. My sister is here and she was,
Good.
And she's at my house using our Wi-Fi because she's had
Yeah.
trouble their own. No,
Yeah, she
I was
mentioned that.
telling her, I could probably, if I put my mind, I could think of a whole bunch of things that are problematic. Among them, the contrast problem that somebody brought up. You know,
Yeah.
I come across websites that are black on red or
Oh, yeah.
red on black. Now, I come
Yeah.
from a background of labeling. I dealt with labeling and pesticides for years, and I
Oh,
wrote.
oh, yeah.
I wrote regulations about contrast, you know, yellow on black, white on black, and one
Yeah.
of the things like red on green is absolutely forbidden.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, so the contrast is a big thing, and everything. And my eyes are failing. But you know, one of the stupidest problems I have, and I, you know, I can easily blame myself, is that every website that you have to sign in, sign out to, does not make it easy to do either of those. I mean, I have websites that go on where the sign in button is not on the home page. You have
Yeah.
to go to one of those little menus and find sign in. Same thing with sign out.
Yeah.
Every website you have a bar at the top that says sign in. and possibly another one sign out, because otherwise you end up going through menus to try out how to get in and out of the darn website. That's one of the things.
Anyway, okay, thanks. Dale, what's your sister's name, Dale?
Jean.
Jean. Thanks, Jean.
Well, I want to make sure that I laud the work you're doing, Elizabeth, especially, you know, filling that niche about the needs of older adults. And also, it sounds like you're holding people accountable. By the way, nonprofit websites are some of the worst. And I wonder if they're subject to the same standards as you've referred to.
Well, all public websites are subject to the standards. The question is whether they're held accountable for it by the law. So, and that I don't know.
Okay.
But they should, you know, whether somebody could sue them if they didn't is another question. It's not like suing a hotel chain, which is they have a lot of money.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Well, I think I will go to my nonprofit. I'm on the board of a nonprofit, and if I can figure out how to copy the chat, just refer to standards. Probably I can just Google standards for websites, right?
Yeah, WCAG standards.
What?
WCAG.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the high level. Let's see.
Okay, because I think our website is not very good. And I know that our executive director is not very tech savvy. So
so this is Loretta. We're redoing our agency website. So how to get around the click here problem that you said? Do you just highlight the title of the information that you're trying to jump to?
You'd put instead of saying to see your I don't know what, give me an example to contribute to this fund, click here. You just say contribute to this fund.
Okay, or you know, for event information, click here. So you would say Juneteenth event, and yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like that application for the blind that you're talking about needs to be updated to allow for the click here, because that is being used, the click here's are being used as a way to have a hierarchical website that's very efficient.
Well, click here violates the WCAG standard.
Oh, it just does. Okay.
Yes, it just does. And it's for that reason, but people just want a list of links. And the problem is that software cannot determine, I mean, it can read part of the context of the list of the link, but it cannot determine which part is relevant.
Yeah. Even with AI.
I was going to say maybe that'll change with AI.
Yeah, maybe, but it's going to be a while, I think, before it can get that smart.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much. It's been helpful.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you, Elizabeth. We really appreciate all the work you put into this and all the work you do. As Dale said, this is great to know that somebody's looking out for these things.
Well, one of the things that I keep saying is that there will always be a need for the kind of work that I do. You know, technology changes, but people will always use it. And so there will always be a need to make it usable and accessible.
Yeah.
Great. So
Okay.
if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and thank our speaker. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Just great seeing you, Elizabeth.
Great seeing you too, Mary Lou.
I got a kick out of seeing Antonio in one of the pictures.
Yeah, I thought you might.
Have a good week, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thanks,
Loretta.
bye.
Loretta, you want to stay on for a little while to have a mini committee meeting?
Sure. Let me stop the record if I can.